Hello, everybody. So I wrote an article recently for the National Post, and it was motivated by Trump's invitation, let's say, provocative invitation to Canadians to become the 51st state. Now,
Hey gang, what's up? Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. There's all of this talk all of a sudden about a 51st Canadian state. How would we ever divide this nation? We couldn't just move as a state. There's going to be a number of states. The prairies are going to be a state. BC is going to be a state. Ontario, Quebec, the Atlantic provinces. It's such a ridiculous thing to talk about and listen to. Anyhow, we have one of our favorites here. Jordan Peterson's going to be discussing all of his angles on the approach. And let's take a look and a listen. I like Dr. Peterson, not a fan of psychologists. However, I am a fan of Jordan Peterson. Let's take a look and a listen. This nonsense, or is it nonsense? Let's take a look and a listen to Jordan Peterson, what he thinks. Here we go.
living in Scottsdale, my daughter is down in Arizona, and I have extensive contacts in the United States. And part of what I had planned to do in moving here was to do what I could to further Canada's interest in relationship to the United States. And I'm still very interested in that. And writing this article was one move on that part. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to read you the article and I'm going to comment on it. It'll be a hybrid performance, you might say, partly reading and partly spontaneous commentary. And I want to walk through the perils and opportunities that now present themselves to Canadians broadly on the economic side and the political side, because Trump is pointing to a structural problem in the West and in Canada. And then also the opportunities that Trump's provocative offer and trolling has put on the plate for Canadians. So I'll start by reading a couple of paragraphs and then comment as I see fit. There's little doubt that one Donald J. Trump has truly and effectively rattled his northern neighbors' chains. Aren't the Americans our friends? And vice versa. Is the president serious in his desire to make Canada the 51st state? He certainly seems serious enough when discussing his proposed takeover of Greenland.
Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran.
Such intensity and unpredictability of purpose has sent the leaders of that country, reminiscent of the Canadian Liberals in their political orientation, into a tizzy, one that is extended to their socialist and globalist European compatriots. Who is this horrible orange-haired man? They wonder. And what does he want? We're all about to find out, and not least in Canada. Why is all this happening, we ask, wringing our hands? And to us, the self-proclaimed greatest best friend and staunch ally of the elephant who parades so theatrically on the far side of our southern border. We might begin to answer that suddenly so relevant question by scrupulously questioning the nature of that friendship and on our side. Perhaps we're not the partners and collaborators we think we are. For starters, it could well be argued, for example, that our much vaunted Canuck niceness, that second-rate virtue, in relation to the superpower who overshadows us in every manner, is and has been a matter of blunt necessity rather than a consequence of our genuine reliability as well-wisher and supporter. It's true that Canada has made sacrifices alongside the Americans when freedom and democracy were truly threatened. That was real, but it was a long time ago. Since then, we have played and continue to play a crooked game with regard to our hypothetical U.S. allies in many important and consequential regards. A telling personal example might serve to introduce this reevaluation. Yeah, this was really striking to me. You know, I spent a number of years in the United States, 92 to 98, when that country was booming in consequence of the internet revolution. And then I came back to Canada, to the University of Toronto. And as you'll see, I brought some students with me, and this is really their story. I lived in the US from 1992 to 98, during the last time that remarkable country truly boomed. When I returned from America's finest university to Canada's, I brought with me 3 brilliant students, 2 of whom, a married couple, were both thoroughly sensible and somewhat on the conservative side. It proved somewhat unexpectedly difficult to take my junior colleagues anywhere in Toronto, particularly at the university, without continual embarrassment on my part for merely being a Canadian, as a casual anti-Americanism would reliably be directed toward them whenever the inevitable topic of their place of origin arose. My fellow countrymen continually said things that would have been regarded as clearly racist, sexist, or ethnocentric had they been uttered to anyone other than an American citizen, assuming rightly, given the civilized nature of the people in question, that they would take them politely and without evident offense. Such comments were much more likely to emanate as well from precisely the sort of leftists prone to proclaim that such behavior is utterly unacceptable, and second, that such conduct would of course never show its face among people as good in their thoughts as them. Such behavior is, sadly, a Canadian norm, particularly wherever the country is left-leaning, particularly where everyone believes axiomatically that we have all the virtues of our democratic compatriots to the south, and then some, particularly wherever everyone is inclined to point self-righteously to the wonders of our now dreadful and oft murderous free healthcare system and its associated highly dysfunctional, expensive, and increasingly unsustainable social safety net. And compare it to the free-for-all in the US they inevitably resort to if death threatens and they have the money. That combined attitude of essentially socialist sentiment and moral superiority was exemplified above all, perhaps, by former Prime Minister Trudeau. And I'm speaking now not of the Feasts who resigned in disgrace after sacrificing our economy to the gods of his self-serving utopian globalist delusion. I'm referring instead to the pair who dallied so self-aggrandizingly with the Chinese Reds and the dictatorial communist Fidel Castro and rubbed the Americans' noses in it, moralizing intellectually and we Canadians also pride ourselves on our peaceful and peacekeeping nature. Take that, Yanks. Contrasting that with the warmongering attitude of the gunslingers we secretly admire but so publicly disdain, forgetting conveniently that is nothing but our positioning under the fearsome nuclear umbrella of the USA and our knowledge of the certainty of their military protection if push comes to shove that allows us to be the sheep of peace who bleat their undeserved self-regard with so little shame. Let's add to that our absolute and disgraceful refusal to pull our fair share of the weight with regard to our own woke, broke, and demoralized military. Trump recently informed his NATO allies that the US would like to see them spend 5% of their GDP on defense. He'd be happy, in truth, with 3 and would settle, and has said so, for 2. Canada misspends 1.3%. A figure so low that we have reduced our own soldiers, of whom there are frighteningly few, to a state where they find it necessary to purchase even their own helmets. We camouflage this failure by trumpeting our commitment to peace, as we love to do when our politicians take the international stage, or when we slap a Canadian flag on our backpacks when hostling through Europe and Asia, to differentiate ourselves from the evil imperialists to the south. This is hardly the way to signal to the US either that we are capable of defending ourselves, thank you very much, or that we are grateful for their existence of Big Brother captain of the high school wrestling team, much disdained protector of our junior hippie student radical selves. Such things matter more than we think, and a lot more now that Middle America is in charge, given the well-deserved contempt that lot have for the niceties of hypocritical socialist, smartest kid in the class peaceniks. Remember, Canucks, the US is now run by exactly the kind of Americans that we tempt ourselves so unforgivably to treat as our moral inferiors. This is not how friends behave. It is also no way to keep friends once they have been hypothetically made. And we've been put on serious notice in that regard. And we're only scratching the surface in our analysis of the problems with Canada-US relations and with Canada itself with that nothing but preliminary analysis. For the last 9 years, Canada has been run by exactly the type of contemptible elitists who are, if anything, even more anti-capitalist, anti-nationalist, and anti-industrial state than the typical Canadian.
So Peterson's gonna ransack them right here. Like, he's gonna tell the truth, like the truth I believe. Anyhow, who knows? My name's Aaron, Canadian Looney. Like, share, subscribe. We're trying here, guys. Like, to make a channel. I'm not sure what this is gonna turn into. It's really tough out there. This media hold they have, like, indies have a tough time getting noticed. I'm up for the challenge. I'm just not sure what I'm doing exactly with this channel. It's hard to get the word out there through this medium. So we're looking at other mediums. I've got a webpage. Check it out, CanadianLooney.com. Check it out. Anyhow, thanks for watching the video. Love Jordan Peterson. 51st state, like 55 states, like there'd have to be at least half a dozen. Anyhow, Aaron, Canadian Looney, we're out. Back to Jordan Peterson. He'll wrap this up.
This has set us up against our putative American allies in a manner much deeper than we want to think. And don't be thinking that any of this is lost on Trump. He clearly despises the recently departed Justin and has as much respect for those who elected him as he does for the Democrats, so much like them, who tortured, tormented, and despised him, and the flyover country MAGA middlebrows who were so much wiser in their political instincts than their Ivy League wannabe masters. Canadians are Democrats in Trump's view, except more so. We think that's a virtue. It's not. It's a liability in all general manners. More specifically, it's a liability in relation to the US, particularly now. It has also, and more seriously, as if irritating our mighty neighbors is not enough, threatened both Canada's economic viability and even the likelihood that it will survive as a nation. We might also note in that regard that the newly ordained and inevitable grand poobah of the currently wretched but still dangerously powerful Liberals, one Mark Carney, is one of the world's prime advocates of the insane inanities of net zero. He is a man who has planned in writing, not least in his best-selling book, Values, the complete destruction of the fossil fuel industry. Bye-bye, Alberta, if that's not bad enough. And it is. He's also simultaneously an advocate of the same post-national view of Canada defined by Trudeau Jr. and his moralistic minions. What are we, according to such good thinkers? Nothing. But if anything, the oppressive, patriarchal, white, supremacist, identityless, colonial settler state defined by the progressive ideologues in the think tanks and elite dining rooms in Eastern Canada and the protest encampments on the campuses of Canadian universities. None of this fills the MAGA crowd with admiration, in case it needs to be said. None of it bodes well either for the economy of Canada, doomed to replacement, according to Carney, by the hydrogen, solar, and wind power that either does not exist, that would be hydrogen, or that would doom Canadians to starve and freeze in the dark if it ever came to replace the reliable grid and transportation we also desperately depend on when it's 40 bloody below. We may, when arguing so expensively and incompetently with the Americans, continue to congratulate ourselves on our comparative righteousness. That diet will become even thinner gruel, however, in a future characterized by their explosive economic growth and our rapid descent toward comparative poverty and irrelevance, green though that pathway may be argued, however falsely to be. Carney, to put it bluntly, is not a man like Justin Trudeau, a second-rater, under the mere influence of the World Economic Forum, that Malthusian fear-mongering cabal of authoritarian elitists drunk on the fumes of their own self-righteous delusions. He is, by contrast, a veritable leader of that movement, an organizer par excellence of ESG, stakeholder capitalism, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, and degrowth. Out with the old, the Liberals claim, and in with the new. But the new will be everything Trudeau so terribly was, but a lot more efficiently and with much more sophisticated rationalization. None of this is lost on the MAGA mob insofar as they deign to notice, and they notice enough, it might be reiterated, to shake our foundation. Consider, therefore, with regard to this, something more pointed and illustrative. That would be the current plight of Alberta.
In Canadian federal politics, the Canucks are represented by two separate yet unequal groups: the globalists who sold out and the opposition trying to salvage a country. These are their stories. Let's go for a spin. So, what do you think?
It doesn't matter what you think!